Welcome to Belief Busters Podcast, where we change the world one belief at a time. I'm your host, Reverend Cherie Taylor Jones, and I'm really glad that you could join us on the journey today. All right, welcome to Belief Busters Podcast. Today we have John Kenny, and he is from across the pond in the UK. And John Kenny is a transformational relationship coach, author, speaker, documentary maker. He helps people to be confident and overcome their personal blocks to success. John founded Interpersonal Relationship Coaching, IRC, a fusion of coaching, counseling, hypnotherapy, and NLP. He also runs his own relationship mastery seminars. Welcome, John.
Hello, Cherie. Thank you very much for having me today.
It's really great. It's kind of surreal to be saying good morning to you when you're in good evening.
Exactly. At least the sun is shining both sides.
Oh, you have sunshine?
We have sunshine this afternoon. Yes, it's been raining the last 24 hours or so, but it's been sunny for the last all afternoon. So.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. So I invited John today to speak about the male role in relationships. And so my first question is, well, what are some of the roles that men have come to believe they have to subscribe to in relationships?
I think, thanks. I think if traditional roles is quite a difficult thing for people to kind of pinpoint nowadays. Because there seems to be much more equality within relationships than what there used to be. Mm-hmm. But I think there's still an idea of the man having to play a certain role. And that could be something like protector, financially supporting, kind of wearing the trousers in the relationship. And I think there's a confusion there now with the roles that the kind of the man is supposed to play. When you look at kind of masculinity, which isn't a male thing, it's like an energy, but it's typically the male that takes on the masculine role and the female that takes on the feminine role. But I think there is more of a balance in that now, but I think the stereotype roles are still existing, where people feel that they should fulfill a certain role, and I think it is along those lines of where do those come from? Where do you fit into that within your relationship, and what you expect of yourself? And I think it is along like those lines that. What we learn as kids, those experiences we have as children are passed on, and we have a tendency then to have an expectation of ourselves to fit into those same types of roles that we see in front of us. And coming from the background I do, and the generation that I do, that was still very much the case when I was a child, that the male was the more dominant figure in the household. And the female was the more subservient figure. I think the generation after me, that's slightly shifted, and I think that's continuing to shift all the time.
Yeah, no, I can see that. So the idea of what a male looks like or should be like, or the attributes, what I'm hearing you say is it's learned. It's not that we come out of the womb thinking this is what a boy is supposed to be and this is what a girl is supposed to be. So no. The learning starts with their family system, of course, and then what else contributes to that?
Well, there's a community system as well. So you just mentioned there, if you grow up in a patriarchal society rather than a matriarchal society, so if you go to some places where it's a matriarchal society, then it's tendency that the female is the person that kind of calls the shots and has the more kind of the power within that society and within the relationships. So yeah, it's very much that it's your environment, maybe what you're taught at school, as well as what your family, what you see with amongst friends, and we kind of then pick up on those ideas of what we should do, and what we have to do in order to fulfill those roles as we grow older. And it depends on then what your kind of experiences might be. So you might go to an all-boys school, for instance. You might go to a mixed school. So again, you're going to have a different idea about what the roles are within those kind of male sort of female relationships. But I think it's very heavily weighted on your family. So generally what you see from your family is where your main role models will come from. And that's the kind of behavior, if you're going to copy or take on board for yourself, that's where you're going to get it from. I think there's still a thing as well, isn't there, that boys are told not to cry and to manage their feelings and all that kind of stuff. So again, when we go into relationships, that'll be perhaps something that we've taken forward as well, that we're not allowed to be emotional or show any kind of vulnerability whatsoever.
Right. And so when men do get into relationships, what are some of the things that you see them having difficulty maneuvering?
So it is about finding a different type of balance. I would say in general that if we are a certain way within our mind and what we think we should be, then we're more than likely to attract someone that fits into that mold anyway. Although that may not be it won't be the healthiest way. And that will adjust over time, and therefore that relationship will eventually struggle because those roles that we might have defined for ourselves because of our upbringing, our expectations, if that doesn't fit within our own sort of sense of values and principles and what we actually believe to be right for ourselves is more congruent, then we will struggle to maintain what we think we're supposed to do. And therefore, you're going to struggle to kind of find your place within a relationship if it doesn't fit with what you actually really want to be like and what you think you should be like. And as we get older, relationships will develop. We'll develop as people, and we'll want different things. And if we're unable to kind of change those ideas about what we should be doing, then relationships will struggle.
Yeah. What I hear is there's a dissonance between the outpicturing of aligning to what you're supposed to be role versus who you really are authentically and at a cellular and soul level. So when they're in this now dissonance, how do you give them permission to change the belief that they were raised in of what their role is, how they are supposed to be a man in the world?
I think there's a lot of work to be done on understanding who you are as a person. So what are the beliefs that you're carrying? Whose values are you carrying rather than your own? And if once you can start to figure out who you are and think about what you want and actually what fits in with you, and then it's about giving yourself permission to say, okay, I don't want to do these things anymore. I don't need to do these things anymore. These are just the things actually that maybe I've learned to do or they're expected of me from somebody else. And it's about being, I don't have the word brave enough to stick to your own convictions and saying it doesn't really matter what anybody else wants me to be. This is who I am and this is what I believe is right for me and this is the person I want permission to be able to do that. Rather than worrying maybe what other people might think, and again coming back to that what you should do stuff.
Females, it's difficult to say, okay, this belief belonged to my grandmother or my mom and it no longer serves me, and so I'm giving myself permission to shift that belief and create new ones. There's a sense of betrayal, and I find that when I do work with men, it's even on a much more intrinsic, I don't know how else to describe it. It's even more difficult, it seems, for them to be willing to say, I can release this belief. Can you speak to that?
Yes. It's like a guilt thing sometimes. I think people get guilt mixed up a lot with other feelings. Whenever I work with my clients, and again, if I have it myself, when people say they feel guilty, I think there's a lot more depth to that. I think guilt is a word that's thrown in there But it's about you kind of managing that stuff within yourself. So it probably isn't guilt most of the time. If you don't think you've got anything to feel guilty about, it's probably not guilt that you feel. It's something else that's kind of you're masking, and it may be that incongruency, that, or maybe you're a people pleaser, or maybe again you think you're challenging those beliefs within yourself, and it's not sitting quite right with you, what you're doing, and you're trying to, as you said, sort of keep other people happy because you're that intrinsic value that you've set for yourself based on somebody else.
Right.
It can be a struggle to break away from what you think other people want from you. But it's about having that kind of courage of your convictions to say, actually, this is now what's right for me. But understanding the emotions that you might struggle with when you're trying to put those into place. Because if people do have expectations of you, they will fight you when you don't want to live up to those expectations anymore. And again, you need to be really sort of straight with yourself. This is what I want to do. I know that this may not fit with what someone else wants me to be or the role they want me to play, but I need to be consistent within myself and happy within myself. To be able to manage those and put my own needs first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you work with a client, what do you, what's your process with them? How do you help them to assess their beliefs, release, and then, here's the thing, create new beliefs?
Yeah. So as you mentioned at the beginning, the interpersonal relationship coaching style, the IRC style, is a fusion of coaching, counseling, some hypnotherapy, and neuro-linguistic programming. So I always start by helping my clients to understand themselves. Mm-hmm. So we look at the background history. So how did they learn to relate to people? How did they learn to relate to themselves? What kind of beliefs might they be carrying based on the experiences that they've had? And once we have that understanding of why they think and feel and do what they do, then it's much easier for us to then look at how we're going to challenge the things that need to be challenged, change the things that they want to change, and by undoing those kind of old, outdated beliefs that they think they have to live by, and put some new ones in place. So it is dismissing the old ones first. So your brain likes to be told what's right and wrong. You've grown up believing these things perhaps to be right, even though they felt wrong, but your brain might still think that they're right. So for you to be able to tell your brain that, no, we don't do this anymore, this isn't for us, your brain wants to hear that. It needs to hear that. And then you can start to say, well, now I'm going to do this instead. This is more for what I want to do. And your brain also likes to hear about the things that you want. So it's important you say, now I want to do it this way. So this is my new belief. This is now my new truth. This is what I'm going to be moving on with. And you can start to balance out those beliefs as you start to build new ones. And then hopefully, if you're consistent enough, you can then start to trigger the new beliefs more often than you would trigger the old ones and be more comfortable with those. Unfortunately, the beliefs that you've always had have already formed like a neuron pathway within your brain, so they will still trigger off in certain circumstances, and sometimes you might find it more difficult than others to not listen to those. But if you've got an alternative, you can always then say, okay, no, I don't do that anymore. I do this. I don't think that anymore. I think this. I don't believe that about myself anymore. I now believe this. And you can start to change the way that your brain works and fire off new neurons to take you down into a new pathway whenever you need to use it. But I think it's vitally important to understand why you do what you do in the first place. Because it makes a lot of sense then if you can go, oh yeah, well, at least I know why I do that. I don't really like it, and then I don't want to do it anymore. But I can see why. I have a reason. We all like a reason, don't we?
Yes.
Most of us don't like to go just on blind faith a lot of the time. oh yeah, well, if you tell me that's the case, then I'll do this. But if I can understand that for myself, then I can go, okay, yeah, I can see why I do that, and I don't want to do it anymore. Or I can see why I do that, and that's really useful, so I'm going to keep that
Yeah.
and keep using it as well. So
Yes.
that's the way I work with people. So the neuro-linguistic program is really useful because that's the way we talk to ourselves, the kind of language we use, the way that we learn different things. So we can really kind of embed new beliefs by changing our language, by learning things in the right way for us, which will kind of be more. So they'll be learned at a deeper level, and we'll connect with them much easier because of the way we learn to do things. The hypnotherapy is really useful when we have blocks which can't be overcome consciously, or if there is a story that we're not quite sure where the start of that story comes from.
Hmm.
So the hypnotherapy is good for kind of delving into the subconscious mind and saying, okay, why is this the case? Where did this all start? And then once we have that understanding of, again, the story that's inside of us, we can then put new things in place to create a new story.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's powerful work. And what I'm hearing is there's a reprogramming that actually has to happen. I think of when you talk about those neural pathways, I liken that to the old LP records, that there are grooves that have been designed, from our childhood, from our school, from our peers.
Mm.
And, sometimes the needle gets stuck, right? Right on that. And ours is now to say, oh, okay, we need to move that needle to a new groove. And
Mm.
what you're talking about is really creating those new programs, those new grooves,
Mm-hmm.
to allow us to hear the beautiful music that is ours, right? That is our own personal song,
Mm-hmm.
and get out in the world. So I love that you're looking at it holistically. You're looking at it from a systems perspective, from the family dynamics and schooling that we grew up with,
Mm-hmm.
where we still hear those voices in our head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's ours to create new voices, not critical voices, but loving and affirming voices of truth, of our
Mm-hmm.
power.
Yes, very much so. It is like, yeah, I love that analogy of the LP. For those of people that are old enough to know what that. Mind you, they're making a bit of a comeback now, aren't they?
They
Vinyl's
are,
making a
they are.
comeback. So yeah, but one of the I've actually used that analogy with clients myself. It's about now it's time to press your own record. Um,
Yes,
what do you want the tune to sound like? Create those new grooves, but actually that LP that you've got is still going to be in your bag. It's still going to be on your shelf, and it will still want to be played every once in a while. But as long as you've got a new record to put on there with your grooves,
yes.
you've always got an opportunity to do it a different way. And same as I like to think of it as learning to drive. When you got in a car, you had no idea how to drive that car, but it
Mhm.
was through that consistent practice that you built those new neurons, you built that new record, you put in them new grooves, and then you just get in a car now and drive without even realizing where you're going sometimes, and you just
Yeah,
get somewhere and you're like, how did I get here? Because
that's
it's just
very
a
true.
natural process. And that's exactly what you did as a kid. Um, but because your brain waves are slower as a child, and because you're in sort of survival mode as a child,
Yes.
then everything that you learn as a child goes in much more quickly and much more deeply. And that's why these beliefs can be a little bit of a sort of a pain to get rid of or to change,
Mhm.
because they are there for a reason. Your brain held on to all of this to kind of keep you alive in a way,
Right. It was
protect you,
coping.
yeah, to protect you from any kind of pain.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not going to want to let go of them easily. So that, I think, as well, its consistency is the key when it comes to change. It's not just about how much you want to do it, and how motivated you are to do it, and how easy it is to do it. I think the more consistent you change things, the much easier it is for you to get the result you're looking for.
Thank you. Yeah. Anything else before we end and you tell us all about you and how to get in touch with you? Did we miss anything?
Um, I think that there's one thing about the kind of the male maybe, and I would say put this out to everybody, but when you want to change things, it's understanding that everyone has their own perceptions of what's right and what's wrong, but it is just their opinion. Nothing anybody ever does is personal, but they're all trying to get their own needs met. So if you can take a step back and go, okay, I know that someone might not be happy with me trying to change this. I know someone might want me to do it this way, but it is just because that's what they want. That's what they need me to do, but it's not personal. So if you can take a step and go, nothing that anyone ever does is really personal. They're just trying to get me to do something the way they're looking for an outcome. And if I'm in the way of them getting that outcome, or I'm part of them achieving the outcome, they will try and get me to do what they need me to do. But they're not actually being personal. So if you can take a step back and go, this is nothing personal, and I have every right within myself to say this is what I want. And hopefully the people that care about you enough and respect you enough will still be there, helping you along the way rather than trying to hinder you too much.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the key, isn't it? Because when we don't take it personally, we're not from the reactionary place. We're able to then be responsive from a kind of like a higher level of operating. And so it makes it easier. And, the truth is when we do change, those who are no longer in alignment with us fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's painful, but sometimes that's like for the best thing that could ever happen to us.
I've noticed that a lot with speaking to some of my clients during lockdown. That they've spent a lot of time away from the people that might have generally been causing them problems. And they've recognized how they're influenced by those. And they are going to let quite a few of those people go now. And because they've had that time away from them, they've realized they don't need to keep up that relationship. And they are going to let them go. And then they recognize, they recognize on the other hand which ones are important, which ones have stood by them, which ones they've missed, which ones have done them, which ones make them feel good about themselves. And again, they're going to engage with those in a more consistent way. So, it is amazing. The only caveat I would have to that would be your family. Most of us don't want to let our family go, no matter how damaging or destructive they might be. So I would recommend that you learn ways of keeping your own mindset in a healthy space if and when you have to spend any time with those people that you don't really do you any good, but you also don't want to let go. So let go of the ones you can, and put your mindset in. Choose your state, I would say. If I go to my parents, I put myself in a state where I find it manageable. So I'm okay. And then when I leave, I come back to normal me and just carry on as normal. But it's about choosing, okay, I want these people in my life, but I don't want to be affected by the way I've always been affected by them. I know they're not going to change. Doesn't really matter what I do. So I need to, if I want them in my life, I'm going to keep them there. I need to make sure that I'm okay whenever I interact with them.
Yeah, that's hardcore right there. When we're able to interact with our families without losing our sense of self, because they're the ones that programmed us with those original coping mechanisms, So, the triggers back home can be really intense. But I love what you said about that you're manageable with them, that you realize and recognize they're not going to change, and how do you love them and spend short amount of time with them and then go back to your life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
John, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you about this. And how do people get in touch with you if they want to work with you? What's that like?
So I offer a consultation to people, anybody that's interested in talking a bit more about how I can help, and a free consultation if they want to chat first, so we can get to know each other a little bit and see what's going on, and obviously whether they think I can help them with the issues that they've got. You can contact me via my website, which is www.johnkennycoaching.com. I'm all over social media, so you can have a look at my YouTube channel. I've got about 50 different videos on my YouTube channel, which talk about some of the things that I do. Got some video testimonies as well from ex-clients. John Kenny Coaching everywhere, all over social media. Just put John Kenny Coaching in, and I should pop up somewhere. But yeah, if you want to contact me, the best way to do it is just go to the website and click on the contact, and then send me an email directly via the website.
Thank you so much for joining us. And so if you're listening on Belief Busters, there are what I try to present are just a myriad of people that are doing this work, that are elevating consciousness, that are giving you permission to live the life and have the purpose that you truly deserve to have. So I hope you'll take advantage of John Kenny Coaching. Till next time. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of belief systems. I hope this gives you permission to change your beliefs and subsequently the world. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast and leave a review wherever you listen. You can reach me at preachitsister.com, where you'll find more resources on this subject. You can book me for a private coaching session to assess your own beliefs. You could even become a guest on this podcast. Or, if you want more info on my book, Turning Your Why into Why Not, you can find it there as well. See you on the flip side.